Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi, Mark at Carskadden. Can you hear us all right? We just want to do a sound check.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
You're a little quiet, but if you could speak up just a little more.
How about now?
Works for us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I appreciate all the staff doing all the testing to make sure the audio works outside and to the committee room. My name is Kevin Murdoch. I'm the mayor of Oak Bay, and we are here gathering for the special council meeting of September 12th. As we call the meeting to order, we'd just like to acknowledge that we do gather on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we like to honor and recognize the Lekwungen people known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, whose connections to these lands and adjoining waters continues to this day. Looking first for approval of the agenda, and I just wanted to make a note that special council meetings don't allow for public participation, so this is approving the agenda with the specific inclusion of public participation. Moved and seconded, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? Don't usually have a lot of debate on single item agendas. My remarks, and please forgive my voice, it seems to have decided to disappear on me today. So welcome to this special one-item agenda meeting. It's intended to give direction to advance the redevelopment of Carnarvon Park. I just want to thank all of you here who are joining us in person and those who are joining us online tonight as well. This is, interestingly, the first meeting as the council's had a chance to consider this matter since we initiated the public input process many months ago. So it's nice to have it back at this table and a chance to meet with some of the people that we've met with over this process. I do want to acknowledge that the inclusion of the question, can the new buildings on the site support housing above them, has certainly caused some members of our community considerable worry. While I understand that the question alone has caused concern for some, and there is a rationale, obviously, for never asking a question where land could be parkland, I did want to just highlight before we started a little bit of why I believe council asking the question was not an unreasonable thing to do. First, any housing that we were considering would be on top of land already covered in a building, not space that would otherwise be green space. Second, if we didn't ask the question, there would be equal outrage likely that we weren't taking the opportunity to understand if housing were even possible. In this case, council chose the path of asking for input on more options rather than less. I say this acknowledging that the stress was caused by, in asking the question, certainly for some, in particular the immediate neighbors. As for the format of the meeting tonight, just pretty straightforward. We'll have a brief presentation on the options, the process, and the feedback received. That's going to be brought to us tonight. Council will then have the opportunity to ask questions of staff or the consultants. I'll likely ask council to, if possible, to provide some narrowing of options so that the public input can be as focused as possible. And then we'll open the door for members of the public to ask questions or provide feedback. While we did just amend our procedure bylaw to allow public input tonight, the intention here is having a limit of 1 hour tonight. And because I hate giving limits on public input, I thought I'd just give a little bit of explanation of why that is. Obviously, we are tonight expected to give some direction for further design revision. This is not the final decision night tonight, and those revisions coming back will have opportunity for public input as well. We also do want to give direction tonight. I think it's important to recognize that this has been a long process, and the ability to advance the design revision process is important for anybody who's visited the park, and I imagine that's absolutely everybody in this room. You know that it's not in great shape, and it's many things in there are in urgent need of replacement. So we don't want to slow down the process, especially when some aspects of the park are currently unusable. And I think we all agree that the community deserves a refreshed park as soon as possible. And third, but certainly not least, we've received obviously a lot of information. We had a large petition, 52 pages of late correspondence, and 170 pages in our agenda package here of feedback coming from the survey, as well as additional correspondence. So there's a lot of great ideas and input, I think, and we do want to have some time here tonight to distill some of that and give some firm direction going forward. Obviously, there's been a lot of input prior to this event, and there's opportunities afterwards. So that's the rationale for this kind of limitation, and we may or may not even hit that hour, but I just want to put that out there. All right, that's a lot. With all of that out of the way, we'll move on to the single agenda item. That is the Carnarvon Park Master Plan Refresh and Main Building Options Analysis. We have Mr. Meikle, who is our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, who is ultimately responsible for all parks. And we have Mr. David Graham, who is our Facilities Manager. You probably have the title slightly wrong, and my apologies. Manager of Facilities and Asset Management, who is our sort of single body expert in terms of buildings. So with that, I think I'll hand this over to Mr. Meikle. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Council. So as mentioned, tonight's meeting is focused on providing Council and the public with the results of the consultation process concerning the purpose and conceptual design options of the proposed field house replacement in Carnarvon Park and the park amenity options for that northwest corner of Carnarvon Park. The consultants are here and will present a more in-depth overview of the engagement summary report. The consultation process itself encompassed an open house, an interest group workshop, and a public online survey, as mentioned. 4 building and park options were presented to the public during this process. The results of the consultation process revealed the following priority order of options from most desired to least desired. So first up and most desired was option 3, the large pavilion with childcare. Next up was option 2, the pavilion with a community room. Next up was option 1, the downsized field house. And the least preferred option was option 4, enclosing the pickleball courts and incorporating housing above those courts. So staff tonight are seeking direction from council on which of the options to advance to the next phase of consideration. The next phase entails the completion of a more detailed technical analysis, which includes conceptual energy modeling, life cycle costing, further details of Class D estimates, and a further exploration of options for grants to support potential facility redevelopment. Given the amount of engagement and involvement and the participation we see tonight from the public in this consultation process, it's clear there's a great deal of interest in and dare I say, excitement surrounding the future of Carnarvon Park. With the results of the public consultation process, staff recommend that council consider selecting a minimum of 2 options to proceed to the next phase of the project to provide that opportunity for reference and comparison. And to further support that decision of which building option to potentially advance to the more detailed architectural and engineering design and proposed construction. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the consultants for the project who will provide a more in-depth summary of the engagement report. With us, joining us tonight from Carskadden Stokes McDonald Architects Incorporated are Ian Ross McDonald, Mark Hosford, Ploy Pia Wasopen, and then joining us from Lees and Associates Landscape Architects is Lacey Barr. I'll turn it over to them for their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meikle. I'm not sure who's taking lead on this, so I'll just, if you have it arranged, please go ahead.
Over to the project architect. I'm very proud to watch Mark present this project for us. Well, yours, Mark.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Your Worship, council members, staff, and members of the public for joining us today. Not present on this call are other members from our engineering team who have been helping us in the background on this project. We are a collective team that have come to the options that were presented to the public. As Steve has alluded to, this is a refresh to the master plan done in 2019 and is kind of one of the next steps that was outlined as part of that report. On the screen here is a schedule of the current project. We started the project back in late February, early March with information gathering. And through that process, I've been meeting with staff to review a long list of options, refinements, and come to the options that were presented to the public. These 4 options were presented in April, and we have been continuing doing building refinement since that time. We are here in September presenting to you the first phase, which was the public engagement part. We will be presenting to council in the future with the ultimate goal of selecting one of the building options for further design development and construction. On the screen is the existing Carnarvon Park as it is today. Generally, starting from the top right of the screen, there are the lawn bowling fields and lawn bowling centers. There are 2 existing multi-sport fields that house baseball in the summer, soccer in the fall, as well as the main baseball diamond in the center of the fields. At the top left of the screen is an area highlighted in a red dashed line. This was the primary area that we examined to review the programming elements as part of the 4 building options and park options. Included in this area currently are 5 pickleball courts, 5 tennis courts, the existing field house located in the central area, the splash park, and play area. The entry to the park is between main pedestrian access to the field house is between the 2 courts, that being the tennis and pickleball, between kind of some chain link fences. During the early stages of this project, there were 7 options that were examined. These range from top to bottom, one being do nothing minimalist option. This would be a small building to contain mechanical electrical rooms that would service the splash park and courts and public washrooms. Option 2 is a basic field house and is represented as option 1 that was furthered to the public. It's a single-story building with concession stand, universal washroom with private stalls. 3 was a field house with community room and is best represented as option 2 to the public. 4 was pavilion with community room and childcare. Option 3 as it was presented to the public. Not presented to the public was housing over the new main building in the central area of the park. It was deemed that this location above the field house would take over too much of the park land and due to access routes to that field house. Option 6 was housing over the existing pickleball courts, which was option 4 as presented to the public. And option 7 was move park offices and yard to Carnarvon Park. Again, this option was not presented to the public. The options that were not presented, or all of these options went through a technical evolution by staff of 17 criteria to decide if they should be moved on to the next stage. And that's shown in the top right of the screen. On the screen now are refinements to the options that were presented to the public, but a full and unchanged version of the options were provided in the report in the appendices as they were presented to the public. Option 1 is the downside field house. Again, it's a single-story building located in the center of the park. Some changes from the existing Carnarvon Park are enhancing the entryway to the park by shifting the pickleball courts and tennis courts to the north of the site. By moving the main entry to the park, we've located it next to the multi-purpose field, which will make it more inviting and friendly for users of the park. Included in all options was a loop of the park. This is intended to be an accessible loop with hard surfacing so that people with limited mobility or wheelchair users could still enjoy the park and its programming. Again, consistent in all options were the pickleball courts, tennis courts, splash pad, playground shown in purple, plaza shown in light pink, and the field house shown in dark pink. All wheels area shown in the green. On the screen is a detailed plan of option 1, the downsized field house. This building contains 2 change rooms, a storage room, 4 washrooms, 2 of them being accessible, a small custodial area with the electrical and mechanical rooms, and a modest concession stand for snacks. The change rooms are located facing the fields, which they'll primarily be servicing, and washrooms are facing both sides of the park, so that users of the playfields could access them, as well as providing easy access from the north of the site to the adventure, splash park, and all wheels areas. Option 2 was a pavilion with community room. Consistent in this site plan is the central location of the field house. There are slight rearrangements of the all wheels, splash pad, and playground areas. And there has been a reduction in the tennis courts from 3 down to 2 to understand a different parking strategy for comparison to the other options. The option 2 detailed plan and enhancement over option 1 was the community room. So this has been split apart from the field house portion of the change rooms, washrooms, and concession. This has been split apart to accentuate the pathways expected through the park, as well as to provide a covered area that could be used for exercise or picnics during all seasons, and providing shelter from rain or sun. Large pavilion with childcare was option 3. Again, it is centrally located in the park, and a slight rearrangement of the all wheels shown in green, playground, and splash pad have been undertaken. In this option, we do note that the pickleball courts have been reduced from 5 to 4 due to the larger footprint to accommodate the childcare spaces. On the screen is the detailed plan for option 3. The field house is largely similar to option 1, and the childcare space has been included on the right-hand side of the screen at the ground level to make use of the outdoor play area facing the fields, and placing the community room with a covered patio over top of the childcare space so that users could take benefit of the views overlooking the splash park, as well as the fields to the south. Option 4 was housing. This was proposed to be a double height covered area over the pickleball courts with 2 levels of residential above it, housing 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units and studios for a total proposed of 24 housing units. Again, the parking is similar to option 2, which would likely require increased parking capacity due to the residential use. During the public engagement portion, district and staff used a variety of means to reach the public. These included Oak Bay news advertisements, social media posts, e-newsletter, email to local schools, direct mail out via Canada Post. An open house was held on April 17th from 4 to 7 at the Oak Bay Recreation Center, and approximately 203 community members attended. Following the open house was interest group workshops held on Thursday, April 18th from 5 to 7 at the Oak Bay Recreation Center. Following these events, a public online survey was proposed, or members of the public were invited to participate in a public online survey via handouts, hard copies, as well as online version of the same survey. And this was held between April 18th and May 10th, 2024. In total, there was received 1,641 responses, which demonstrates the public's keen interest in this park. In terms of the survey methodology, section 1 included questions for respondents to provide information regarding the frequency of park use, the types of amenities used, and any challenges preventing park use. Section 2 questions focused on 3 amenity options and 1 housing option. Section 3 presented the 4 park options and focused on the outdoor amenity spaces. Section 4 consisted of open-ended questions, allowing the respondents to provide any additional information to the project team relevant to the master plan refresh. And Section 5 focused on demographics. In terms of the building and park options and responses, as Steve mentioned, option 3, the large pavilion with childcare, emerged as a top choice, with 42% of residents ranking it as the best option. Similarly, option 3 for the park emerged as the top choice, with 41% ranking it as the best option. Option 2 had a large amount of first place and second place votes, and option 4 was strongly opposed, with 70% ranking it as their least preferred option and 66% ranking it as their least preferred option for the park version. In conclusion, the goal of this phase is to summarize the findings of the public engagement and activities. 4 conceptual designs were presented to gather feedback, but are not intended to be final renditions. The engagement activities and level of participation clearly shows Carnarvon Park is deeply valued, and the next steps will be to narrow options and undertake engineering and design development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hosford. Back to Mr. Meikle. And is there anything else you wish to add before I turn this over to council to ask questions? Great, thank you very much. So over to council questions. Ask questions of staff. I am, maybe just as we go around and ask questions, I wouldn't mind understanding, just based on, this is the first time, as I said, that we've had a chance for this to kind of distill these options back, and having seen this, so I'm gonna, I'm just gonna ask the council to, actually, I guess I'll just read out what I was going to say here, just so that we have some clarity. Obviously, a lot of correspondence is related to the question of housing. I anticipate a lot of public interest tonight is focused only on housing, or largely on housing. And I do also want to make sure we have a chance to look at the many recreational amenity options for consideration. This is the first time we've had the opportunity to consider the public input into the options, as well as the drawings, which show the scale and location of potential housing at the site. I'm going to ask this very gently. If you are sufficiently sure of your opinion, I would just like to ask each of you to share during this segment, and if you're not sure yet, then that's fine, whether or not housing is one of the options that you're still willing to move forward for further consideration. We are trying to narrow it down to 2 tonight. If any member of council is supportive of at least having the conversation of housing at this site based on the designs provided, we'll also welcome public input onto that matter, because I think it's important during the public portion input. However, if no one on council, if it's it's 100% that feel housing will housing be an option that they're not going to consider advancing at Carnarvon tonight. Obviously, we are still looking at advancing housing in general. I think it's worth sharing that early, so we can take housing off the agenda if that's appropriate, and focus public comment on the other matters on the agenda. So I'm just going to throw that out there. If people are comfortable, please do so. Really primarily getting to questions of staff, and then we'll give a chance for the public to provide, but I'll go anywhere. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
So would you like just to state now whether or not we think that housing option should be on the table?
I'm going to ask for that opinion, if you're willing to give it before the end of the session. You don't have to do it right at the beginning, but if everybody's comfortable and knows where they stand on that, then yes, that would be helpful, I think. So that if there's 100%, then that makes it easier for us to consider options.
Thank you. I'm going to say right off the bat that I'm not in approval of having housing on this site. And if it's 100% around the table that does not want to have housing, then I would be prepared to make a motion at that time. But I will ask some questions if that's okay.
Yeah, I don't want to get to motions until we've had a chance for the public input on pieces. So,
okay.
But go ahead.
Sure. So I have a couple of questions in regards to a couple of the options. The first one is, has our emergency services been consulted about some of the different designs for the park? And the reason I ask is because I know there's some kind of what we might call dead spaces where people could congregate, and I know that they have issues with that at places like Oak Bay High School, etc. And so it would be interesting to know if the emergency services has been consulted.
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Braithwaite. That would be happening in the next phase of more detailed design process. At this point, we're in that conceptual design, unless Mr. Graham has more to add there.
Mr. Graham?
The one option, I think, was option 2, that had the central space that tied between the main field and the splash park. We have had, I'll call them unofficial discussions about that could be area of high graffiti, it could be an area of vandalism, and so that would be something we'd look at under what's called SEPTED principles, and yes, so very unofficial, nothing in detail.
Thank you. And then my next question is for the central building, if that's the way we choose to go, was there consideration of going to 3 stories at that building, since you're already putting an elevator in, or is there a basement that could be used for storage and then freeing up some of the space on one of the main floors?
Go ahead, Mr. Graham.
Through your worship, being that we've added an elevator, there's nothing code-wise why we couldn't go a 3rd story. It makes most sense operationally for a daycare to be on the ground level, and obviously the field house with the change rooms and the bathrooms to be on the ground level. The 2nd floor being a community room was easy for us to move up a level, and there's nothing code-wise that wouldn't allow us to build a 3rd level that could be community rooms or further space for that. It would just be some additional extra dollars that would of course go into the construction.
Thank you, and I'll ask a couple more and then we'll pass it on to someone else. In the designs, I see that the 2 fields are being kept the way they are, and those are full-size fields that are used by Bays United. But I'm wondering, on the Henderson side, is the baseball diamond still going to be there? Because there is a baseball diamond there right now.
Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, there are no plans to change any of the green space, essentially, the space where the fields are. The baseball diamonds, both baseball diamonds and both fields would remain.
Thank you. And thanks for asking the question. There was quite a few comments on that question in the feedback.
So I'll pass it on to someone else and get my other questions later.
Sure, no problem. Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. And thanks to the consultant for the report and to staff as well. I cannot support housing on parkland in Oak Bay. However, I do have a couple of questions. And if I can go ahead, I'll just ask through you to, I guess this would be to the consultant regarding the survey. How was mobility defined? Do you know? I mean, was it... I'm just thinking of accessibility to the park, but how was mobility defined? Because I looked at the survey, but I wasn't clear what that meant exactly, because there are different levels of mobility, as you know. Thank you.
Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will ask our consultants for any clarification there. Thank you.
I'm going to actually redirect to Lacey, who helped us with the public engagement, I think.
Sure. Anybody who wishes to respond is welcome to do so. You would just have to unmute yourself at this point.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, and to Councillor. Sorry, I'm just looking at our survey so I give you the correct response for how mobility was defined. This can be any really physical mobility. It could be elderly, it could be those that are pushing a stroller. What we heard was that some people are entering entrances that aren't that main entrance, but then they're not able to actually get to the field. So adding in that accessible pathway will help them be able to reach all parts of the park. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You said you had 2 questions, or was that the... Okay. Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. And I'm not in favor of rezoning park spaces to residential land for a number of reasons, but I too have a couple of questions. So my first question is, of the options that were presented to us, how would the schedule vary between the options?
Is that Mr. Graham or Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. I might just ask for a little clarification on schedule, what you're referring
Timing
to.
schedule, is that the...
Yeah, I'm curious to know if the anticipated larger buildings would in fact push the schedule out to a longer build-out period, or cause more extended downtime of any other parts of the park.
Thank you. Mr. Graham?
Through your worship, as part of the construction phasing we'd make sure that we have as little disruption to the park as possible. But yes, the larger building will take several months longer. Second story, elevator deliveries, things like that will always take longer than a single story thing. We may also, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but talk about perhaps redoing the splash pad at the same time and tying those together if we were to do that. And so that would allow us to keep those services and upgrade those all at the same time. So, but yes, a larger building will take longer to build.
Please continue.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And since we've already identified that it's an urgent renewal that is required, I think the schedule is rather of interest to most of the community. My next question is, I know what is right now, it's kind of option 2 is in our the 5-year plan and the long-term objectives that we had already agreed to. Option 3, while desired by the community, is at a significantly higher price. So I'm wondering what opportunities there are in the income that it will be created by that option to reduce the gap between the 16 million projected for option 3 and the 9 million for option 2.
Thank you, Your Worship. That would be some of the more detailed analysis that would come back with whichever options are forwarded by council or advanced by council. Certainly childcare, we have a model in the district of running childcare at the Neighborhood Learning Center, so we'll have a fairly accurate model to follow there, and depending on access or acceptance into the provincial childcare programs, that can be an option. We also have models of community rental space at the Windsor Pavilion, which would give us a sense of how often those are rented and utilized for programs and other services, and give us some indication of that. Again, at this point, that detailed analysis will come forward in the next phase, depending on which options get advanced by council. There are also several grant opportunities out there, in particular for childcare. There's existing grants through the provincial government to provide childcare spaces. We're a little too early in the design phase to know exactly what that might look like, but we've seen other examples in the 3 to 4 million range of similar sized childcare spaces. So.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, and just thank you for that information. And just as a follow-up to that, there are some challenges, and I know in resourcing childcare centers. And so I'm wondering if staff has had any discussion about whether that is something the district would take on and the expanded requirements of it, or if there was discussion about perhaps seeking a private operator for childcare, if that was the route we wanted to go.
Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think all would be looked at in terms of modeling of what those options are for childcare. As mentioned, we have a model in-house, so to speak, of running childcare, and we would take a look at that in the first place. The option is for a full day daycare for 3 to 5 year olds is what we're focused on and where we know we have need in this community. There is some differences in staffing those because those offer full-time positions for individuals with their ECE, Early Childhood Education certification. And so not as much staffing challenges as we see in the part-time situations of before and after school care, where it's a bit more of an awkward schedule to fit into somebody's working and school lives, for example. So full-time childcare seems to be a bit of a better option in terms of hiring and recruiting staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions right now.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Watson.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And through you, I think first to Director Meikle, please. This is a question about something that wasn't part of the scope of this, but it really just to remind me and maybe others who are curious about the lawn bowling facilities, which do sit inside the park. What is their relationship? What is their relationship to the rest of the park in terms of use? Is that a lease that's going on for a long time, and that's why this was not considered as part of the program?
Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is my understanding. We do have a long-term lease with the Oak Bay Lawn Bowling Club, and that would be my understanding as to why that was not included in this element of the master plan refresh.
Thank you. My second question is probably for the consultants, if I may. On on a page that in the report that's titled Current Uses of Site in Section 1. So it's actually page 29 of Crescatton's report, but it appears as page 41 of our PDF. There are two graphics at the bottom of the page, but they're not titled. So I'm trying to figure out, and they show the same kinds of uses, but in different quantities. So I was trying to figure out what that was actually about.
I'll give the consultants a second to find the page.
Could you
You're talking about amenity
please just
option one or
repeat
two?
those page numbers?
In Carscadden's report, I suppose, as it was submitted to the district of Oak Bay, it's page 29 of your report. The whole page is headed Section 1, Current Uses of Site. And the first graphic, it's a histogram, and it shows a frequency of use of the park as people reported. But then there's two other graphics that show the actual things that people did, but there's two of them, and I couldn't figure out why there were two of them.
Yes, seems like those could have been titled a bit better. Thank you for pointing that out. However, those survey results do show up in the appendices as unedited forms. However, the difference being one, the respondents to the survey were asked how they used the park, and they were given the choices and selected the choices. And the second bar was how their children use the park. So the same question asked, but for their children.
Thank you very much. That clears up that mystery. And one final question, probably also for the project architect. It's about across the options. And I ask this because it's come up in some of the feedback already. It's about how many washrooms get specified as one is redeveloping a public space like this. And I was particularly curious to know why. I know this is very, very, very early, even like concept plan, but that in option 2 there were no restrooms provided in the community room. And I wondered what's the thinking around the total number of restrooms you need to provide, across all the options, and what provides that direction when you're designing.
I'm not sure if that's a question for Mr. Graham or for the consultant.
It's for the consultant, I think, because they've obviously thought about that when they put the concepts together.
Sure. Mr. Hosford?
Sure. So I guess responding to perhaps why washrooms weren't included in the community room for option number 2, that being the field house with community room. Both of the buildings were situated on the ground floor. So as I perhaps thought that users of the community room could use those washrooms at the same level. However, that is a great comment and could be refined in the future phases and development of these options. In option 3, where the community room was on the upper level, a washroom was included in this instance. So I guess we're looking at different kind of scenarios and gathering public feedback on this, but would be further developed in the next phase of the project as well.
Thank you very much. No more questions, but I will just make a comment in response to the mayor's request about housing. Would I be interested in moving it forward? No. No, my answer is no. But it's not because the proposal in option 4 was in a park. It's, in my view, because the additional complexity of investigating it with rezoning, additional design time, trying to find partners and everything would delay the project, even if it were selected, by such a order of magnitude length of time. And the neighborhood has been waiting for this park refresh already for a long time. So it was with respect to timeliness that I would reject the housing option for further analysis, but not because it's in a park.
Thank you for that. Councillor Smart, and then Councillor Appleton.
Well, thank you. I will start by just also saying that I'm not in favor of moving forward option 4. We have heard from the community that successes of this project would be to enhance existing park activities, create a central gathering space, increase activities for youth, enhance green spaces. And I believe that the addition of housing as presented, as much as it's needed for our community, would take away from those objectives through shadowing, massing, increased parking, and taking away from the sense of retreat that a park space typically provides. So in looking at a 50-year timeframe, I believe we are likely to regret building housing in Carnarvon Park, as this park will be even more utilized by the community throughout the years. But I do strongly feel we need to prioritize looking at our other municipal assets for the potential of housing. I do have a few questions. My first question is, through you, Mayor, probably to staff. There's some great ideas in this report that are not yet evident in the options presented. Can we assume that all findings and recommendations in this report will be pursued in more detailed options, or do we need to give specific direction today towards things such as basketball courts, bouldering for youth, natural play areas, fitness equipment, off-leash dog areas? Are those things that we need to give direction on today? Thanks.
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. The list presented by Councillor Smart represents amenities for the park. As you can see in the design options, we're very conceptual at this time. There is detailed design to come back and to be looked at in terms of the splash park, adventure play area, all wheels area. Right now they're just designated zones, if you like. So there will be further detailed refinement to those park amenities in the future.
And just follow up on that question though, is there, because I'm quite happy to take if there's, I think conversation around this table of things that we would like to at least explore as part of things coming back. I think it's worth us asking that question tonight, because if we don't, and it's not on the list, then it probably won't come back as one of the things looked at. So please continue, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Meikle. A few of the respondents brought up the need for change rooms at all in the park. And having been a parent who has kids that have played soccer and baseball and such, I do, concur with not having needed to use change rooms in parks for my kids at least. And so I just wondered, being that that's a large percentage of the program, did that come up at all? Like, where did the idea that we actually need change rooms in the park come from? And are we certain we need that programmatic element?
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding is that came primarily from the user groups that utilized the primary sports groups, Carnarvon Baseball and Bays United Soccer and Castaways Soccer. So that we just, listening to their response and their feedback and general desire to have change rooms.
Please continue.
Thank you. I just wanted to, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Meikle, just follow up a little bit on some of Councillor Patterson's comments with regards to what model of childcare or after-school care. And one of the things that I'm aware that has happened in our community is, with the desperate need for after-school care, a lot of the elementary school gyms have been taken up after school for after-school care, actually preventing those gyms being used for other fitness activities for elementary schools. And I'm wondering how much the conversation has happened around whether or not there's going to be a desire to rent the one community room as after-school care, thereby not making that room free for dance classes and yoga classes and community meetings. And I'm just wondering if that conversation has happened yet with the school district.
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. That conversation has not happened to this point with the school district. At this point, we're not reflecting usage as after-school care in that location. It's a bit of an awkward location for transport from schools and to and from schools. And so really the childcare that is proposed there is a full-day childcare for 3 to 5-year-olds primarily. So that's what we're looking at. The after-school care option has not been considered at this point, and the community room, absolutely, we'd be looking at fitness programming for hopefully for all ages. That there is a need for that in our community, and we certainly see that through our wait lists and a number of our fitness programs.
Please.
Thank you. Just one question around, there was a lot of different comments and opinions with regards to concession stand and kitchen space and sharing kitchen spaces. And there is a great model in our community that Sir James Douglas School has a commercial kitchen space that can be rented out, that can be multi-purpose and then act as a kitchen for the community space. And I wondered if the idea of a commercial kitchen space that could double as a concession space, if anything like that came up at all in the engagement.
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not familiar with the idea of commercial kitchen space coming up in that, but certainly a more enhanced concession space came up from the particularly the user groups. Baseball in particular does run a concession at Henderson and there, and so that came up. Commercial kitchen does have some other requirements in terms of building requirements, and that would be something we'd have to take a look at in the designed architectural and engineering next phase.
Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, just one last question. There was one comment around consultation with Songhees, which I really appreciated seeing. And I just wanted to confirm that the intent of this comment was really to include all Algonquin speakers, that it would include the Esquimalt nations, historically understanding that they also share connections to this land.
I'm sure who to give that to.
This was in the consultant's report.
Mr. Hosford, perhaps you can answer the question.
Yeah, sorry. I guess not familiar with that comment, but I think the purpose of the engagement.
I think Mr. Meikle here can answer the question, so please go ahead, Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had included that in the staff report, and information has been shared with both Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. It's likely an oversight on my part in missing that in the consultant's report of not identifying Esquimalt there. And but information has been shared, and an invite for further consultation has been offered.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I guess as the last to speak on the subject, second to last, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, Your Worship. As the last councillor to speak on this subject, people may be unusually interested in my opinion on your earlier comment. I guess then I will just start by saying I am of the opinion to not proceed with entertaining option 4 at this time. I feel that the public's opinion has been really clear on this subject, both through the online survey and through what we've heard directly from members of the community, and I appreciate their engagement on this. Frankly, Carnarvon, I feel that folks who live in the vicinity of Carnarvon Park have been quite patient in waiting for the district to look at the redevelopment of the site, and I sort of hear loud and clear from folks that they want to maximize the value of the park for recreation, for green space, and for as a community amenity. So I don't believe that option 4 is a viable option for the site at this time. I will take the opportunity to say that moving forward, the district, in my opinion, should continue to evaluate housing on all civic-owned lands and on those lands which are zoned institutional, and explore each of those options on a case-by-case basis. Thank you, Worship. Just in terms of detailed questions for staff, this again picks up on the subject of washrooms, and I see in a couple of the designs there are accessible washrooms provided separate from the change rooms. I'm gathering that the change rooms themselves, A and B, would imply typically, gendered washrooms and that sort of thing. Are the washrooms that are accessible and some of the additional washrooms that are not designated, are these intended to be gender neutral washrooms? And was there thought put into potentially family oriented washrooms with extra space and just with that essentially a family change room with more room if you've got if you want to have a private space for your family?
Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. We have considered that in the conceptual plans at this point, and considered them as what we would call term universal washrooms, so options for families to utilize those washrooms. The washrooms in the change room also are universal in nature. The change rooms could be utilized by any sports team, and we would also have the ability to open those change rooms should there be a desire to do so. I could envision that certainly in the summertime with the splash park open, and utilize those change rooms as people required. So they're non-gendered as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Your Worship. One more question, if I might.
Please go ahead. Oh, Mr. Meikle?
Sorry, I meant to pass to Mr. Graham.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you. Through your worship, the original plans that we presented to the public actually had much more of a gender-neutral washroom, and we heard quite clearly on the feedback, so we did some design revisions. So we have incorporated each one of these to be still gender-neutral, but individual stalls, and the larger washrooms could be, I would often call them family washrooms. They would have change tables in there, and as well as gender-neutral, as well as handicapped accessible.
Please continue, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the questions, and through you to staff, our Parks and Rec staff, one of the questions and one of the options that was discussed, and I heard from members of the community, was the option of potentially having Parks and Rec staff on site, and that was presented in the long list of options and indicated that it did not proceed forward. But maybe just for the public's edification, maybe staff could provide a little, just a short synopsis of why that space maybe isn't the ideal location for staff workspace, and what sorts of considerations would go into deploying Parks and Rec staff to an off-site location like that if that were to be considered.
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. So there's sort of a couple different levels, if you like, there. The community room options and certainly the daycare options would have recreation staff on site, and an option for some office space on site, which would have recreation staff there. The option that was not forwarded to the public was to actually move the whole parks yard, all their equipment and parks offices, to Carnarvon Park, in which case we would lose a field, and that was not considered feasible nor a reasonable option at this time. So that's why it did not go forward. Those fields are so well used, and in fact, being a lifetime soccer player myself, I happen to know that particular field at Carnarvon is one of the best draining fields, and natural grass fields in the region, and certainly would hate to lose that.
Please continue, Councillor Appleton.
That's it for me, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can I just, so I just have a few questions. Oh, and I'll just say for the record, I'm not in favor of option 4. I think I did appreciate the efforts made to try and find something that could work, but I certainly don't think that what was brought forward was possible. So I do think that's my strong feeling on that. Questions, I'll try. I have lots of small things, but I think probably can mostly be dealt with offline, given the nature of sort of the general direction we're giving here today. Can I just ask, from my understanding, there's all of these have the same storage room essential layouts, and I'm just curious what drove that. There was one comment buried in the responses that asked the question about, given the seasonal nature of the use, things like the fencing for the fencing for the baseball and the nets for the soccer, if there was, instead of having them sort of lying around littering up the fields when the off seasons, if there was places to store those. So I'm curious what drove those and what they're anticipated to hold.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, the primary piece was feedback from the user groups and a desire to have storage space there. We would also require, there's storage required for parks operations, so equipment can be stored there for parks maintenance, as well as in the future, we'd envision the ability to run day camps within Carnarvon Park, as we do at Windsor Park and other locations. And so there'd be some storage there for running a day camp of that nature. Primarily, you'd be looking at sports equipment, however, specific to each of those user groups. So you're correct, just more safe and secure storage for those user groups and not having to leave some of that out on the field space, exactly.
But no contemplation of actually moving the larger pieces of field equipment out of place, other than just moving them off to the side of the field in the off season. Sorry.
That's correct at this point. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that. And I guess a similar sort of question on the on option 3 with the community room at the top floor. There wasn't much storage space shown there, but obviously I know from experience we have at Windsor, there's a lot of use of putting away chairs and having some specialized equipment, again, like yoga and things of that nature. Is that just something that would be essentially, those details would be worked out at a later time? Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that certainly would be something that could be dealt with in a more detailed architectural design. And we're continue to take notes tonight on these kinds of requests from council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have was just around public space. There's a lot of, I think, very thoughtful comments around making sure that all the areas from courts to the splash park, and it was noted in the consultant's report as well about the need for sort of appropriate seating. But also, I think there were some comments from the public about, emphasizing the desirability of having things like picnic tables and things that are gathering spaces that would be used. And my question is, if is there room for something of those items to be put in there, and B, is it possible to design it in a way, given they'd be primarily used in the summer, that they could be moved out of the way, and those flat open spaces could be used for multi-use, multi-sport kind of activities in the shoulder and winter seasons. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding is, yes, that certainly is possible. One of the features that the architects have provided is, may not be very clear on some of the drawings, but what I would term an oversized roof, if you like, so roof overhang, and a covered plaza area, especially in option 2 and 3, I believe. That would provide some, again, those options to have picnic tables or other activities that could happen outdoors but undercover. So it would allow some greater flexibility there than we have now. And certainly there's room for other further park amenities such as benches and picnic tables to be added.
Thank you. Other question was there contemplation or intention of having roof access for the on the second floor of option 3, so people could leave the community room and go out into an outdoor space on the roof of the other section?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Similar to the model at Windsor Pavilion, the desire is to have a covered patio area there that could accompany the community room for rentals and could be a viewing space, as we see at Windsor Park with many of the rugby games, and those patios are filled. So yeah, that's the model we followed there and provided that kind of option.
Thank you. My next question is just, we're facing some space issues with the old buildings for the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts over at Firefighters Park. Is there any, just curious, what would the impact be of creating enough space for other community groups to use this as sort of those kind of community clubhouses, which get used once or twice an evening, I think, a week? I'm not sure if that's something that would have to have likely would have to have dedicated space, because I believe they have quite a bit of equipment that they need to leave behind.
Thank you, Your Worship. That certainly is an option and certainly can be something that's discussed. As you're correct, one of the challenges with a multi-purpose space is providing the opportunity for regular users to store equipment, thus, again, back to the question around the storage space, so that could certainly be an option there. We certainly have heard from Bays United Soccer in particular that they are also interested in clubhouse space and use of a community room for that. So, there's ways to manage that and ways to look at how we integrate several groups into having that as kind of their home base, if you like, or as their clubhouse space. So that's certainly a possibility. And again, as we head into detailed design, other space could be added. It just increases the overall cost and size of the building.
Great. And I think I know the answer to this question, but just for complete clarity, the concession discussion here would be a replacement of the existing sort of hot dog stand that the baseball teams use, and just basically one concession for the entire area. Is that correct?
That is probably our assumption at this point. We have, my understanding, we have heard that the existing concession does need some attention, and so that would be the proposal, and then that existing concession could likely be used as additional storage space.
Great, and I think the answer has to be yes to this, because is what was put in here, but just at the ground level, there's 4 washrooms being proposed here. Is that deemed to be sufficient, particularly at peak times in the summer when the splash park is full of little kids who don't have very big bladders, and there might be a couple of teams playing in the fields? And I'm just curious if that, if that sort of threshold measure has been sort of thoroughly thought through if there's a range of options there for a number of bathrooms.
Thank you. I would also include the washrooms that are located in the change rooms as options for summer. As I had mentioned earlier, those likely would be usable during that time frame, so it gives some options there. I might ask, the consultants may have more knowledge of kind of those, what's typical or what's standard out there in terms of number of washrooms per usage, et cetera. So,
Thank you. Mr. Hosford?
Yes, thank you. I think in terms of the amount of washrooms, we compared relative to the facility that was there currently, as well as maybe facilities elsewhere in different municipalities. But as we move forward with the design development of this, probably another check of that to determine if more or less are needed can be undertaken.
Yeah, I'll just, if I may, I'd like to just quickly build on what Mark said. Unlike the building, where the building code determines the number of washrooms required for an occupancy, parks enjoy no similar set of rules or regulations. So I think it's really a comparative analysis of what's typical out there, which we've done commensurate with the level of effort that's required to produce this kind of early report. And we would, of course, refine and elaborate the requirements as we move ahead. And I think this addresses an earlier question from one of the other councillors that asked a similar question that maybe got slightly lost when they asked. So I'm glad it came up again.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to throw out the scenario that I'm envisioning us getting lots of calls about, which is a couple of baseball games underway, a 7th inning stretch, one bathroom closed for repair, and an awful lot of people trying to get in. So I think we have to do some planning to make sure that we're sort of scaling it up for the big events as well as the small. I think we'll have more use of the site as it gets refreshed. That concludes all my questions. I'm going to go to the public for input, but I saw Councillor Green, you had an initial question that's come to you.
It was just a quick supplementary question on washrooms. I just wanted to confirm that through you, Mayor, that they are handicapped accessible. I have a very bad knee at the moment. Everybody knows this, and I'm waiting for a replacement. And I have suddenly become aware of how important those are. Excuse me. So I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I can confirm that. And actually, also one of the features in this park redesign at that northwest corner of the park is, I would say, better mobility access between parking lot, between tennis courts, to the building, and simply getting around to those washrooms will be improved. So,
Thank you, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And just in looking through the report, there is a chart that says what challenges, if any, keep you from using Carnarvon Park. And I noticed in the third category, it said doesn't have the features I want. So I'm wondering if part of the open houses, we had the discussions with the public, if some of that information came out and is incorporated into this new plan, if it altered it in any way. I'm just wondering.
Mr. Meikle?
yes, thank you. That feedback has been incorporated again in general themes at this point. So the adventure playground idea, the all-wheels park idea, some of the other picnic benches covered plaza area, were all results of that feedback and do provide some flexibility in programming and service options.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite and then Watson. Councillor Braithwaite, you mentioned the notion of having a motion or something to that effect. I'm okay with taking a motion, just something as simple as basically that, as we, council moves to take option 4 off the table.
I would
so let's
move
be
that
clear.
we remove option 4 from the list of options under consideration for Carnarvon Park tonight.
Second.
Any further discussion on that, Councillor Smart?
I appreciate the motion, but I feel like it's not fair to have that motion before we hear from the public.
Okay. I'll go to this table and I'm happy to defer that motion. I appreciate the applause, but I also just always like to remind everybody that there are people who have dissenting opinions. We always want to make people feel very welcome when they're here. So thank you, Councillor Smart, for that. I think that's a reasonable point. The motion's made. I'll see if there's a seconder. We've kind of allowed for a moved and seconded. Okay. So the motion right now is just to take it off. I hear what Councillor Smart has said about wanting to hear from the public still. Any further discussion on that? I'm still going to call the question. I guess the motion was made duly, so I will take it. I would always make the motion in the point in this case. If there's anything that arises, we could always have another motion to change that, but I think it just would provide some indication at this point. Any discussion? Councillor Green?
Thank you. I think we've had a great amount of feedback. I think it's I think the indicators are all clear. I think the percentages are very large. A 75% plus response rate is almost unheard of on surveys of this type. So I think the community has been very clear with us. And further, it's not so much about housing. I think we have to be really clear about this. This was also about protecting parkland in perpetuity. This was about making sure that green spaces in parkland remain available to our community. And the more we densify, the more those spaces become critical to public health. So I think it's not about being against housing. It's more about finding suitable locations other than parkland and green space. Thank you.
I'll allow some discretion that, please don't do that. Honestly, we can't have an effective meeting if we're going to have applause when people say things you like and have things. We just want everybody's opinions to matter here. Thank you. I don't want to get into a big debate, but I'll allow a bit of discretion on this one. The question is really, are we going to consider it tonight and give that direction? Because I think this is to inform the public input portion of it more than anything else. I think we've all said what we said around this table, which is we all agreed not to consider that, or we felt that was appropriate. That being said, so sorry, back to you, Councillor Smart, as the mover of the, you already spoken to it once or a second time.
Yeah, thanks. No, I appreciate it. I just, I agree with the vote. I've already expressed my opinion, but I really think it's important in meetings like this that there is a safe space for all viewpoints. And there are a lot of people that are really struggling in our community right now that really need a safe space tonight. And I think it's really important that we save that space for them to share their opinions in a safe way. There are so many people that are slipping into unaffordability right now. There are so many people that are desperate for housing. This isn't the right spot, but I think it's important that if there's people here tonight that need to speak to the fact that they wanted to see housing in the park, I think it's important that we give them a safe place to say that. There was a lot of comments that came out during this period of time against renters, and I just want to speak to that specifically to just say that renters are a very valued part of this community. They are as important as taxpayers. They are real people. They are our residents, and I'm very saddened to see them being treated like second-class citizens. And we need housing in this community. This isn't the right spot, but I think we need to have respect for all viewpoints tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. I'm going to call the question here, but I'm just to speak to it very briefly. The motion is not to be clear, people can come and speak to us about housing tonight. It will not be entirely on point because if the motion passes, we agree not to move that forward as one of the options. But to Councillor Smart's point, I think it does not mean that opinions are not welcome on that as well. In the interest of meeting management and not spending 16 hours here tonight, I think it's important for us to give as clear a direction as possible what it is that we are going to be deciding in this evening. But I just want to express also my appreciation, Councillor Smart, for your words. I think it is really important that we remember we are a whole community. It includes everyone. All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Not opposed, that carries. Yeah, you still have the floor, and then I have Councillor Watson.
Thanks so much. I did remember the question I was going to ask when both you and Councillor Smart were talking about the concession stand. On all of the plans, it says snacks only for the concession stand. I know that the Carnarvon Baseball makes a lot of money from selling delicious hamburgers and French fries and hot dogs, and I'm hoping that that concession stand will still enable them to have hot food made and prepared from that concession stand.
Mr. Meikle.
Thank you. As an enjoyer of hot dogs, I certainly hope that is the case, especially ballpark hot dogs. Yeah, the detailed designs can certainly do that, and we can take a look at moving towards a commercial kitchen option as well within those detailed designs, no question, yes.
Thanks so much, and through you, Mayor. And then also the storage. If there's any opportunity somewhere that we're going to be able to have more storage, as a past president of Bays United, I know how important the storage is to user groups and how lacking it is throughout the municipality, and they really struggle with finding places. And I know they've utilized the old building at Carnarvon for storing a lot of their soccer balls, etc. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to either expand the storage when we look at a bigger design as well. Thanks.
More comment than question. We're trying to stick to questions, then we'll get to public, and then we'll come back to this thing for comments. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be, I think it's a question to staff, but maybe it's the consultants will be listening. I just wanted to ask about the childcare space in option 3, because it certainly seems to be driving the costs of that option. And I'm wondering if there's any way to look at this space from a design perspective. Daycare's typically Monday to Friday, maybe 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., which leaves all day Saturday and Sunday in the evenings. And so it means that for some portion of the week, the space is in effect vacant or underutilized. Is there some way to look at it and think about carving out a portion of it that could be shared space with appropriate controls over it for the daycare users, so that there were some revenue opportunities or at least public use opportunities within that footprint?
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. That space probably right now has shown some of the most detail in any of these conceptual drawings, and that is because of the requirements of licensing and childcare space licensing. And so they have very specific requirements of that space. It is a challenge to move that space from childcare to general use. There may be a portion of it, the sort of middle section, if you like, general section of the room that could house that. We do find it a challenge in our current space at the Neighborhood Learning Center to transition between those uses because of the very strict guidelines from the licensing.
So it's not impossible, it's just maybe difficult, or it would take some detailed work to look at it? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct. It is possible. One of the factors we do have to consider would be, how much space does that actually mean for community use? The space is built on those strict guidelines, which actually gives a per square footage per child guidelines. And so when you start putting adults in that space, it becomes smaller quite quickly. So it certainly is possible to take a look at that. We have not had a great deal of success at the NLC and at the Neighborhood Learning Center in making that kind of transition between those programs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I'm going to just, since I'm thinking of it, thanks to your question, I'm going to just raise this more as a comment than a question. I'll criticize myself later. There is, potential there for things I know up at Henderson that's very popular for renting out for things like birthday parties, and the proximity to the adventure playroom and its own outdoor play area that's closed off would make it probably an incredibly attractive place for weekend party rentals if that design architecture could be done and add some revenue into the model as well. So just throwing it out there. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following up on potential options for option 3, and we're early days here yet, but I'm just wondering what staff's involvement has been with the with Childcare BC's New Spaces Fund. I understand that there's the new intake will not be expected until next year, and of course there's an election between now and then, so that's mostly unknown. But just wondering whether staff have at least done might have done some initial exploration with how that fund might key in with this facility.
Thank you. And just for clarification for the public, because it's not always familiar with these government programs, it's a provincial program that allows for significant amounts of capital, $1 million plus for capital things if you're building dedicated childcare spaces. So over to you, Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we have had ongoing preliminary discussions with the province. We've in the last couple of years, our Neighborhood Learning Center childcare programs, both after-school care and the full-day daycare, have been accepted to the $10 a day childcare program. So through those programs are all tied together, and we have maintained discussions with them. There's certainly interest. They are aware of the current wait list we have, which will fill another 24 spaces easily, we feel. And so, yeah, there certainly is interest from the province in us having a look at that for sure.
Thank you. I think that concludes the questions. We may have more after the public input portion. So at this time, members of the public are welcome to come forward and talk to us. If there's people online, I just want to point out, we did have one person register ahead of time, so we asked people to do that so we know who's coming, but you don't have to, so anybody's welcome. But I'm just going to invite Connie McCann, the president of the Victoria Regional Pickleball Association, I believe yes, if you can come forward. We're going to try and give people about 2 minutes per person, just so we can, and we did have I think we have a copy of a letter from you as well in amongst the correspondence that we have. So process here is very straightforward. State your name, municipality of residence, and then you have your 2 minutes to speak. I'll just politely ask you to wrap up at the end of that. And again, I've just asked everybody, we may have clash of tennis and pickleball. Let's all be respectful. So please go ahead.
Thank you. For the record, Your Worship, my name is Connie McCann. I reside in Oak Bay, 1178 Beach Drive, apartment 205. I am the president.
For the record, nobody has to give their actual address. You're welcome to just state the municipality is fine.
Well, I want you to know that I wear many hats here, but to your relief, I am not going to talk about housing, but I am going to talk about pickleball, and we are a sizable user at Carnarvon Park, and that's what brings me to the table here this evening. Victoria Regional Pickleball is over 1,000 members. We have grown 500% in 4 years. We grew 40% in 10 months. So it is what we call a sport on fire, and Carnarvon Park is one of our homes, and I play there with my quiet owl paddle. I have referenced in my letter to you, and I have brought the pickleball, regional pickleball strategy, which was signed on by Victoria, District of Saanich, Township of Esquimalt, and the District of Oak Bay. So I would reference page 3 in the summary, which is add more courts to meet the demand. On page 14, it talks about the membership is a useful indicator to gauge a timeline of a sport, and certainly I have related what the membership gauge is. I would like to emphasize page 52 in the strategy, which is maintain the same number of courts. We have very few dedicated pickleball courts in our region. Pickleball does not like sharing courts with tennis, and tennis doesn't really want us on their courts. And that is absolutely a good position. But reality is there are more tennis courts than pickleball courts. So even losing one court, which is in option 3, is a disaster for us. One court makes a significant difference. So I am here tonight to ask you to keep the 5 courts in all the options. And if you could consider some sort of covering beyond, and of course, keeping sound attenuation panels, very, very important, but a hybrid type of cheaper cover, not the big tennis bubble cover, which is upwards of probably $1 million. But
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, please. I just want to let other people have a chance to speak as well.
So I would just like to encourage you, keep the 5 courts. It's very important for the pickleball community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please come forward.
I sent you, my name's Ann Tiplady. I live in Oak Bay, and I sent you all a piece earlier, and I thought it was very rough, and I should redo it. So this is my rewritten piece. I'm immensely frustrated that planning for Carnarvon Park upgrades doesn't include critically important emergency response facilities. In a calamity, such as a large earthquake with many large aftershocks, we can expect the park to be filled with people sleeping out, afraid to or unable to return to their homes. The building upgrades in Carnarvon could be planned to include the ability to feed large numbers of people, provide first aid, etc. I thought this would be a really out of the blue comment, but many of the kitchen comments work for me. This idea comes to me because 13 years ago, on August 28th, 2011, we were living in Vermont when Irene, a hurricane, then a tropical storm, dumped torrential rains on us. In less than 12 hours, up to 8 inches of rain fell through Sunday afternoon and evening. I spent the whole time manning the pumps in my basement. Hundreds of homes and businesses were swept away by floodwaters, as well as highways and roads, big and small bridges, crops, cars, and sadly, a person. With roads either flooded or washed away, many communities were cut off. The aspect of this that is relevant to Carnarvon planning is that many communities were isolated, as we might be after an earthquake, with little or no outside help. People in those villages and towns came together in central locations to cook and feed everyone for days and even weeks. Afterwards, many towns took advantage of grant monies to create facilities where people could shelter and large volumes of food could be cooked so that people could be fed. They even built wheelchair-accessible showers. I understand that water might not be up and running after an earthquake, but shouldn't something like this be included in the new plans for Carnarvon facilities? Rooms being planned for community use might need little alteration to accommodate this. Windsor Park Pavilion is an emergency gathering place. Shouldn't a new pavilion in Carnarvon also be that? Government funds might even be available to help pay for such facilities, and those facilities might even create revenue if they could be rented out for events like wedding receptions, which goes along with what we've been hearing tonight. Failing to include emergency response capabilities into the planning for Carnarvon Park is a missed opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Tiplady. I do believe, I don't think our emergency management plan would be updated to include this specifically yet, but would likely include that in the future. So any additional comments, Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. All of our public recreation facilities are designated as gathering spots and safe zones after a community, after a disaster. This would be included as Windsor is as well. And there certainly are some options to build to post-disaster standards that can be analyzed and looked at through the next phase of technical analysis.
Great, thank you. Thank you for joining us
I think
tonight.
the park would be full of people.
Please come
because
forward. Yeah,
they would
thank
leave,
you.
They would leave their houses.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. My name is Lloyd Milden. I'm a resident of Oak Bay. I've been instructed by my wife to thank Councillor Smart for her incredibly thoughtful remarks on renters. Thank you very much. What has been lost in the park as a result of many of the changes that have been made in the last little while is any space for unstructured activity. We have a house that backs onto the park, and many times we would watch the kids come over and get into the lacrosse box and just take a tennis ball and some hockey sticks and knock it around and have some fun. And of course, when they're doing that, they're not getting into trouble. We thought it was just wonderful. Well, the lacrosse box is gone now. There is no basketball hoop, as Councillor Smart pointed out. You can't just go over there and have a little game of pickup. Basketball hoop doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's not there. So point one, there isn't really any wiggle room in this plan for unstructured activity. As a homeowner who has a house that backs out onto the park, I can tell you that pickleball noise abatement doesn't work. It's unfortunate because both my wife and I support pickleball. It's an active sport where people get out and do it. We don't play pickleball, but it's good to see people doing it. It's just noisy, and especially in the summertime. We're trying to get to sleep at 10 o'clock and pop, 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 pop. We're still hearing it all the time. And so is there a possibility of looking at time restrictions or requiring the use of low noise equipment, such as the representative from Pickleball had? I think these are questions worth looking at. I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity to put them in front of council.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Milne, you'll be happy to know we had quite a lot of, please come forward. Please come forward. We had quite a bit of community feedback about both the unstructured play and the requirement to keep noise down for pickleball, so. Oh, sure. Well, there are time restrictions. Councilor Braithwaite was asking me just to point out, there are time restrictions for pickleball courts, but people don't always listen to those, so fair point. Please, welcome.
Thank you. Susan Mitchell, North Oak Bay, and we also do live within a earshot of the pickleball courts, and the majority, if not 99.99%, are very respective of the time. Unfortunately, it sounds like someone may have had other experiences, but I can say that it's been a great group. I'm actually here to speak to something I had sent earlier in an email to council regarding the childcare facilities. There is a provincial grant, as was earlier mentioned during the presentation, for the childcare facilities, also noted in the agenda with a very tight timeline of October 15th. My question, I guess, to your worship is the capacity hasn't actually been identified as how many kids would that structure be housing for childcare, because North Cowichan received $18 million for 158. And I actually sent the link to council when I did send my email a while ago. So I'm just curious, what would be the plan for capacity of the Carnarvon Park childcare? Because it seems like the grant is not just provincial, it's also federal, and it would also align with previous speakers or previous comments regarding emergency funds and kitchens, which would also be part of the build that you could include in separate grants. So just a question to council on, or to your worship, on the 24 spots, was that all it is, or are we looking at more?
Sure, thank you for the question. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to turn my head over this way and ask Mr. Meikle what the size of the childcare spaces that was being contemplated in this design.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're generally trying to keep within the footprint of the existing building roughly, and without taking out trees, for example, to expand that footprint. And as mentioned, licensing, the licensing regulations specify per child square foot requirement. And so as you add children, the space gets bigger. So 24 right now fits with what we've working with in terms of that footprint. There certainly are options. And I will just clarify, the grant referred to in the my staff report is actually not the childcare grant. It's the energy efficiency grant. So that's the one that's got the tighter timeline, and we're still trying to research if at this point we're even eligible for that. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Meikle. I know we have some grant writing and support in our district that helps us with these things. So hard to answer the specific question of specific grants here tonight, but just in general terms, is it sort of like a 1-to-4 ratio for childcare? So it has to be in multiples of 4 or 8 in terms of the scaling, Mr. Meikle?
Not necessarily in terms of the actual physical space for the building. That is, again, on a per child basis. The what does get stipulated then is the ratio of staff to children. And for that age group, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% positive, but I think it's 1 to 6 or something. But that is more the stipulation of the actual 4 or 6 children.
The options are in chunks of 6 kids.
Correct.
So, okay, thank you.
So just to add, the 2 grants that are available for the record, Your Worship, are the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement, which is 1 grant, and I'm not sure if that's federal or provincial. The secondary one is the Childcare BC, this is the BC grant, sorry, New Space Fund. So if you're providing new space, because the children that were at Carnarvon Park were displaced to Oak Bay High School, right?
They've been, yes. Anyhow, thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Well, I want to just give a chance for people to speak, so
Thank you.
thank you for that. Please come forward. Oh, welcome. I'm also going to just suggest if anybody is online and watching and wishes to address council, you can raise your hand within the app, and we will go to the online speakers as well, and I'll just quite happy to alternate between the online and in-person. Please, welcome, sir.
Hello, thank you for allowing us to talk tonight. My name is Tony Gibb. I live in Oak Bay. I'll be fairly short. I am here because Carnarvon is a place I play pickleball. I don't want to see a reduction in the number of courts. And in fact, I would love to see an increase, but none of the options presented included an increase in the number of courts there. But I wish that was the case. The second point I want to make is I did go to the April 17th open house, and I was quite shocked by the presentation of of houses or homes being built in the park. But not because they were houses, but because the idea of putting them under a pickleball court, which has to have a 30-foot roof on it or a 30-foot height requirement. And then they were talking about building, I don't know, 2 stories or what it was above that. And I thought it was a red herring, and it was a waste of time, as you see tonight with a number of people who are opposed, and yourselves, to the idea of it in the park. But I do wish to encourage you to take leadership in housing in this community and do something with municipal land and start seeing some kind of housing for people in this community. I live in an apartment, rental. I think a perfect location for you to start is in the senior center and the library. Redevelop it, put 8 stories in, put rent-to-income housing. You provide the leadership instead of closing off development and proposing things like housing on top of a pickleball court. One more comment is I have on the proposals is about the childcare. I understand that there was a childcare place there at one time, closed down, lack of business. It would be interesting to know what the demographics of that area are and how successful a childcare could be in that location. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibb. I don't think it closed down for lack of demand. I think it closed down because our per building was insufficient. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, the actual childcare and the children in that childcare were not displaced. They were moved to the new building at the Neighborhood Learning Center. It was obviously an improved facility for childcare, so the spaces were not lost. They were moved to a better building.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak? Please come forward. Yeah. And welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ryan McQuillan. I'm the general manager for Bays United.
Hello, Ryan.
And I just wanted to thank you all for having this and continue to advocate for storage at Carnarvon Park. We have 1,500 members, both youth and adult, that sorely need this space to store soccer balls and equipment that we hand out to teams at the beginning of the year. I appreciate the need for locker rooms, but that's not something we've advocated for as strongly as storage space, so it would just be a shame to see it go. I know that there may be building for the baseball, and we'd happily work with the baseball to expand that building and financially contribute to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Barbara Preston. I'm from Oak Bay. I've been very much involved in the door knocking and whatever else to discourage housing in the park. And before we move on to 100 other things, I'd like to say thank you for the decision that you've made. I think it's the right decision, and we're very grateful, all of us. I think you could have saved us some pain had you announced right up front that you were thinking about housing in the park instead of waiting until you spent a whole bunch of money on developing a plan and kind of springing it on us. I think that would have been better management. I'd like to say also that I think a covered sports facility, whatever it is, pickleball or whatever, doesn't belong in a park. It should be at a rec center. And finally, I guess I would say costs are important. This was a very expensive idea, and it really wasn't feasible. And maybe cost should be considered more immediately than it has been on this case. So with that, again, I say thank you. I hope this decision stands, whatever happens in the provincial election. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Preston. I will thank you for that and invite the next person to come forward. I'm just going to say I defend the idea of looking at housing. I do take, I think we've all learned some lessons here on how we might, bring those sort of ideas forward in a way that doesn't leave such a gap between the initial idea and a chance to provide some additional guidance, which is kind of the part that we, I think, got away from us on this one. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Lynn Anderson, and I too have been a part of the group that have been very concerned about housing going up in our park. Thank you very much, Mayor and councillors, for listening to us. I feel like we were heard today, so thank you again. And especially thank you, Councillor Smart. I appreciate your comments regarding the renters as well, and I agree. I also wanted to just put a plug in for tennis because I don't play myself. My husband does. And I've heard lots of people up here defending the pickle courts and wanting more. I spend a lot of time in the park. I go there every day, usually twice a day. I walk a little dog. And tennis is a big thing too, and I don't want to see the tennis courts reduced any more than they have been, down to 3. I see people in there every morning, every afternoon, every nice day. And I know going down from 5 is probably important to make room for other things, and I understand that. But I would really like to see them not reduce it any further than the 3. So, and again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. Please come forward.
Will Moore, Oak Bay. I just want to thank you for finally undertaking the master plan. I've been a part of that process a while ago, and I'm just thankful it's finally happening. I just think there's not enough voice for the kids. Like, the parks are used by adults, by kids, but really at that park right now, it's the splash pad. And kids can go play tennis, kids can go play soccer. I know my kids at 15, 12, and 10 now have been using that park. I used that park, and the 8-year-old one had the pool that was up to your knees, I think. And it's, if you can, one gentleman mentioned unstructured play. Unstructured play is so important. So whatever you do, please include that in. I know it's kind of there, but emphasize the fact that kids use that park, and they'd use it a lot more if there's more for them to do. So whatever you do, please have the kids in mind. I know with the facility, yes, that's there. But other than that, please just thinking about the kids, think about yourself as a kid. Whatever you do, just have that perspective. Kids. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Please come forward.
Hi, I am a resident of Oak Bay and a mom and have kids at baseball and soccer, and I just want to say thank you for keeping the baseball diamonds in mind. It's very important.
Could we just get your name for the
record?
record?
Oh, sorry, Liberty Smart.
Thank you.
And yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you for that. I support keeping the tennis courts as well as an avid tennis player. But yeah, thank you for hosting tonight and letting people voice their opinions. And I'd love to hear more about this sort of new concession idea as well with the baseball park. The one there is operating, and we finally have it going again. And it's been really fun, and families are loving it. So keeping that concession going is great too. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smart. Anybody else? Yeah, please come forward.
Okay.
You know the process?
Steve Gorham, Oak Bay. So thank you. I really appreciate the fact that you listened to us, and some of you had your minds made up before, and some of you modified your opinions for various reasons. I think this is a very good outcome for the community. I hope that we don't have to do this again. We'd heard rumor about potentially Firefighters Park being looked at for housing. Please don't. You'll hear the same thing from us again and again. It's fundamental to us that parkland is sacrosanct, and we'd like to look at some way to create covenants to protect parks. And we'll talk to you more about that later, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's still on our agenda. And I think I just want to reiterate what Will Moore, I think his name was, said a minute ago. Our kids use that pickleball, or the lacrosse box for all kinds of things. They learn to ride their bikes in it. And I really don't agree that parkland be moved more towards seniors. I'm one of them. But parks are for kids. They really are. And us adults, we can find all kinds of ways to recreate and to be physically fit and all that. But kids can't easily. Neighborhood parks are gold, and they really are meant for kids. So I just want to press upon you that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, please come forward.
Good evening, Council, Your Worship.
Oh, yeah, you need to just push the button. There we go.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. Thank you very much for the conversation and dialogue tonight. I appreciate the position you took at the end. My name is Robert Bettauer, and I'm a resident of Oak Bay, and I live about 3 blocks from Carnarvon Park, and my family have used it quite extensively for the last 14 years. Mostly playing tennis. I'm very supportive of all the sports that have an opportunity to develop youth, adults, and seniors. I think it's wonderful that it's a multi-age, multi-use park. And I just wanted to say that, for example, pickleball said, we don't want to lose 5 courts. I support that. We have 5 tennis courts. I do appreciate that there will be some reduction because of the amount of space that tennis courts take place, and we're supportive of the plans to increase the community aspect of the building and also provide childcare center. But I would recommend an ideal number is 4 tennis courts, and please do not reduce below 3 tennis courts. They're actively used after COVID. Tennis has grown and is also going through a major growth. And I just encourage you to consider that tennis is still a major sport with lots of opportunity for all age groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please come forward.
Hi, good evening, Marcelo Lacan, Oak Bay. The reason I'm here, I just came here from coaching soccer at Carnarvon Park. And I wanted to be able to continue to do that. And I support all the other sports, the ones that I play and coach and the ones that I don't play and coach. I think it's important. But the reason I'm here today is to oppose parking in public parks. And I am encouraged by the community engagement, and I'm encouraged by the decision that I understood was taken here. But my glass is half empty kind of guy. And I am worried. And I'll be very specific why I'm worried. 2 councillors expressed their opposition, but they qualified it. It was not an opposition in principle. It was not a moral imperative. It was a qualified opposition because of, in the case of Councillor Watson, lack of expediency. In the case of Councillor Apple, was not clear, but he expressed 3 times that was at this time is not convenient, at this time. Well, I'm extremely worried because this leaves the door open, and I am concerned that this may come back. Maybe not Carnarvon, maybe Fireman's Park, maybe somewhere else. And so I want to prepare for this. The community has been sensitized by now about housing on parks. If it comes back, we're going to need a bigger room because these rooms only sit 34 people. And you're going to need 200 seats for that time if it comes, because there will be 200 people here. So I would like to direct my question to the technical staff through you, if it would be possible to increase the size of this room to a capacity of 200.
Many stories on top of it to add more people.
You took my idea, because once I thought about that, it's like, how about some housing on top?
There's nothing blocking future redevelopment of this site, but we're here talking about Carnarvon Park today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do just want to, in fairness, throw my support and defense behind all of the councillors. I think we all need to we come at this position and looking at things from various backgrounds and points of view. And we are legally obligated by law, by the community charter, to have an open mind when we're contemplating things. So it doesn't mean we have to advance options, things, so we don't have to put forward options. So that's a choice we can make at the beginning. But I think it's important that, I think there is a fundamental dedication to following the intention of having an open mind and having a good debate, that I don't want to criticize people if they're coming at things with a different point of view or have rationale for it. I think it's an important part of our discussion here that we have that respectful, and we do tend to have respectful disagreement as we talk about issues here. So I think that's important to reflect. Please, there's a bit more time available if people do wish to speak. Otherwise, we'll come back to the council table and continue our deliberation. Welcome. So please go ahead.
Sue Probilski, Oak Bay, and thank you very much again for your decision. It was very heartwarming to us, as I've lived behind the park for over 30 years, and it's very special. I'm going to provide a different option. I think pickleball is a great sport. I enjoyed playing it. I think it's awesome. I just think it's in the wrong location. The pickleball should be at Henderson, where there is no surrounding housing. If you're going to create another space, if you're going to have to tear up the pickleball and the tennis courts to create a new Carnarvon Park, move the pickleball to Henderson. And even if you wanted to cover it, it's not in the middle of an open green space. It's right on Cedar Hill Crossroad. And then you would have room for more basketball courts, a sport court for ball hockey, etc., to be included for the growing community around Carnarvon Park. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to give one more call to the people online. If anybody wishes to talk to us, this is the time to use the React tab in the Zoom app to raise your hand. We're running low on speakers in-house in the room here, so I just want to make sure I give that call out before we close down the public input portion and come back to this table to get some direction. Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Shelby. I'm a longtime resident of Oak Bay. It's my home. I've also recently been appointed to the accessibility committee, which is yet to start. But I had some thoughts, and I thought I should represent the young people today. So I took the survey whenever it came out, and I also thought that the housing there would be a bad idea because living above a pickleball court sounded like some kind of CIA torture. So I just voted against it on the survey like a normal person. And I think a massive petition was a bit of an overreaction. So I'm sorry you guys had to deal with that. One of my, a bigger concern, I think, is like our crumbling road infrastructure. Like when you go into Carnarvon Park, for instance, the road is all busted up. I learned to ride a bike there many years ago. I don't think you could safely do that now because the road wouldn't be flat enough. It would be uneven. I went to preschool at Pantington Station there. So it would be nice if they could bring that back while also having space for the community. I think universal, single stall washrooms are a great thing. Also, I don't think we should be focusing on, just kids or just seniors. The park is for everybody. And the thing that I notice is that a lot of people like to take their dogs there. And despite off-leash dogs not being allowed at all, people still do it because there's no other park really in Central Oak Bay that you can take your dog other than down by the high school. And there are no enclosed dog parks in the whole municipality, I was told by the Parks Department. And dogs are great and most people like them. And they should also have a space to play and have fun. You could, take the back corner with all the trees. I don't know. I think that would be cool. Yeah, I think that was everything. Thanks for having this.
Thanks, Shelby. Appreciate your input. Is there anybody else who wishes to talk to council this evening? Oh, there's someone online, yep. Leona Frenette, please go ahead. Oh, sorry, Leona Frenette, you had your hand up. You don't anymore, but you're not, if you wish to speak, I'll give you the chance now. In the meantime, I'll call if anybody else in the room wishes to speak to us, I can call you forward and we can get to you after any online. Yep, welcome.
Hello?
Hello, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. First of all, I also want to share my gratitude for the wisdom that you showed tonight in the debate and discussion and questions and honoring those most sacred places to us, our parks. Canada has some of the best park systems in the world. It defines who we are, and I thank you for protecting that. However, I'm sympathetic to the need of housing. I've always felt that we just don't try hard enough, and we leave too much to private developers. I remind this council that we have a significant vacant land in the middle of our beautiful municipality, and we continue to be at the mercy of governments outside of our municipality. And I speak clearly to the Oak Bay Lodge site. This site, as we know, is massive. It can contain medical services, services to seniors, and housing. I think we've waited far too long for the Capital Regional Housing District to come forward with a plan. It is, in my mind, criminal. I would encourage you to do whatever you can to bring this property back into our community and provide much needed housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frenette. Is there anyone else who wishes to talk to council tonight? Okay. With that then, I see nobody else online on my screen. Nobody else in the room. We'll come back to this table. We have 3 options available to us tonight to move things forward. I think it's probably fair to say that option 3 is as a significant front runner in terms of theoretical options is probably going to be included in that. So I think we're going to be discussing the pros and cons of options 1 and 2 as much as option 3. And I think it's also worthwhile for us perhaps once past that point, maybe I'll turn to staff on this one. I think thank you very much. And people are welcome to leave if you wish at this point, but you're also welcome to stay. We always welcome to have people, nice to have people in the room. Mr. Meikle, there are, I think, hearing some of the questions and the conversations and some ideas about, some of the nuances without getting really far into the weeds in a public meeting like this, where we're just going to be basically making a laundry list of potential things to consider and come back with. It'd be impossible for us to rank them or say we're going to, this is our priorities or anything else. So is the preference here that we give priorities on the option sort of from the building perspective and perhaps submit sort of all the other sort of odds and ends of things that we've maybe come up with tonight and heard? If there's things that we want to make sure that are considered, that we just share those, just send them in by email so that you have them and you and the consultant can work with them. I'm just trying to get a process here that doesn't bog us down too much. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. For the most part, obviously the next phase will be some of the more technical analysis, especially concerning the energy modeling that will come back to council. From there is then hope. The hope would be we've identified a single building design, conceptual design, to then bring forward into the architectural and engineering design phase. So they're anticipated at least 2 more opportunities for council to weigh into those, some of the more specifics you've mentioned. I know I've certainly taken notes, as has Mr. Graham and others tonight, on some of those key features. I'm sure our consultants have as well. But I'll pass to Mr. Graham. There are some elements that, whether tonight or into the future, that probably would require council resolution to move forward with.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I don't have a total shopping list, but a few questions. One was to build on the EOC at I believe the project charter. We were talking about making sure the building is EOC ready. So a question that I would ask that I would appreciate getting motion on, yea or nay, is do we want to build it to a post-disaster standard? Or, because that's obviously a significant extra cost and a significant extra analysis on our engineering team, or whether an EOC, much like this room, which is not to a post-disaster standard, is what you were thinking of.
And just for the public's benefit, EOC is an Emergency Operations Center.
Sorry, yes. Emergency
Acronyms
Operations
are always
Disaster
hellish
Center.
if you're not in the industry. So the question is whether or not, to what level of post-disaster sustaining would be thing. If I may, I don't know that's entirely answerable here tonight. I think we'd probably be curious to know what the gap is.
Okay.
And this is in the shadow, of course, of what has to be a post-disaster, which is an emergency, the protective services building. And so if those are happening largely at the same simultaneously, we may or may not need this to be meeting quite the same standard, especially given the costs attached to it. So I don't know, I think we just need to have a sense of what that would be looking like in terms of cost differential.
Okay. Thank you. The other option is if you are considering option 3, which was a 2-story building, so the elevator is already inherent in the design, whether you would want the extra costs for either a basement or a 3rd floor. So those were something that will obviously change the mass of the building as well as the costing when we start to do our estimates.
I sort of saw some general nodding around here. I mean, again, they'd be somewhat rough estimates, I would think, but it may be helpful for us to get an understanding of what those costs are so we can consider the context. Go Councillor Appleton and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Worship. So would you seek a motion to that effect, amending the option 3 to consider such a design?
I think we should probably consider that at the time that we're making the motions to what to advance.
I'm prepared to make a motion to advance certain
Motions
options
are
at
always
this
in
time.
order.
So
Motions are always in order. I think I'm happy to take that.
thank you, Worship. So just for the purposes of council discussion, I would move that staff undertake technical analysis of options 2 and 3 for the Carnarvon Park building redevelopment.
Moved and seconded. And to answer your question, yeah, I think a motion to amend that to include pricing options for a floor above or a floor below would be in order. It doesn't have to be done right now, though. I'll just say that if we want to have some more discussion. You have the floor still. Is there anything else you wish to?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just briefly motivate with respect to options 2 and 3. In my opinion, and it concurs very strongly with what the public and what the feedback has told us, which is option 3, to my mind, is a preferred option. I feel really strongly that the childcare space is an important community amenity for the community overall and the specific North Oak Bay community. So, and I think we have an opportunity for funding there, and it's just desperately needed. So I think it's important that the building is a multi-purpose space for the community. So for that same reason, I don't support option 1, even though I know that it meets the basic requirements. I think that if we're going to go to the time and care of replacing this building, that it needs to include new and refreshed amenities for the community. So I think option 1 is sort of the bare minimum. I think we really want to achieve far more than the bare minimum, and I think we need community amenity space at Carnarvon. So irrespective of which option is ultimately considered, I am of the mind that option 3 is preferred in my mind. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, is moved and seconded. So speaking to the motion now, I've got a speaking-ish list quickly popping up. In order I saw them, Braithwaite, Smart, Green.
I'm first, yes?
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I would concur with Councillor Appleton's comments, and where my head goes for option 3, because I would think that option 3 would be the first option that we should, that's my favorite option. But I think that the basement, if we did go into a basement, then we could actually put storage in that basement. Then we could use the storage area that we had in the other building for something like a commercial kitchen or something like that. If we went to a 3rd floor, we could actually consider having the scouts in that area, or we could consider, we heard Bays United say that they would be willing to put money towards some sort of a clubhouse or
towards something shared space, so we could consider that as well. The thing that I would say about option 3 is I heard pretty clearly that we would need to, I think it's option 3 that only has 4 pickleball courts. I think that we would want it to have 5 pickleball courts. I think that's pretty important. And so whether there's an option to move that building over a little bit to be able to, or move the parking, to ensure that we have the 5 pickleball courts and the 3 tennis courts, I think would be very important. So that would be my my comments on option 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. And then Councillor Green.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I am also most in favor of option 3, but think option 2 would be a great second choice to explore as well. I think option 1 isn't future thinking enough for the lifetime of the building. I'm in favor of potentially looking at a basement if it meant that we could have a smaller footprint and then have more park activities, or be able to accommodate the scouts and guides, or make room for that extra pickleball court. I'm very hesitant about the 3rd floor, just from the sense of wanting to still keep this a park pavilion and to keep that sense of retreat and park space. So I be hesitant to explore the 3rd floor. That's just where I'm sitting with that. And then my small little wish list of things I just wouldn't want to lose from all the report reading are, number 1, more activities for youth and teens. We're really struggling with anxiety and mental health in our youth. And so the ideas that came up about basketball, climbing walls, just even social gathering spaces where teens can plug in their phones and chat, like anything for teens, I think is super important, and I don't see that yet. Also, plentiful bike racks, covered, secure for cargo bikes everywhere. If we want less people driving to the park, we need great bike racks. And I loved the option of parking along the street as opposed to having a parking lot. I love the idea of exploring what an off-leash dog park option could be. If we're going to have change rooms, I want to see a gender-neutral change room as well. Could be smaller. And yes to public art.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Councillor Green.
Thank you. I too will support the motion. And my only question was, one of our council colleagues mentioned the patience of the neighborhood, the patience around improvements to Carnarvon. I'm just wondering, I support the motion, and this is not a question that can be answered tonight, but I'm hoping to see a timeline or schedule where there will be some improvements made that are timely and don't preclude park use, maximizing park use any further. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I too support looking at option 2 and 3, but I do keep in mind that what we call longer-term planning, but it's a 5-year plan, does right now include option 2. Option 3 is a much farther reach cost-wise and would have significant implications for our financial plan without yet having the benefit of any information about the new emergency services building or public works facilities. So I would like to amend it so that we put those forward, but with the options that are presented, we also are provided a cash flow analysis so that we have a better understanding of the decision at the time we're making it. And by that, I'm meaning a high-level cash flow projection.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Patterson. Any other discussion on the motion that's in front of us here? There was, go ahead. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I will support that. I agree that option 2 and 3 make sense to pursue. There's been a number of comments about things that might be sort of added on to the review, and I do would like to ask that one of the things that might be looked at in looking at both option 2 and 3 is reducing the amount of change room space and making it available for something else. I am not sure that that is the best use of the space, actually, given the behavior of sports teams with respect to using change rooms. And our representative from Bays United said that although they'd like it, it really wasn't a make or break kind of thing or a must have. And I think that's a lot of real estate, and especially doubling up that amount of real estate for changing. I think that might not be money well spent. So I just like to add that to the kind of program for review, if I may.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watson. I guess I'll speak to the motion that's on the floor right now, and if there's any desire to add, to modify it to include some other options like height or depth, then we'll get to that in a second if anybody wishes to move it. I'm going to speak in favor of the motion. Thank you, Councillor Appleton, for making it and giving us something to speak to. I don't think I have a lot to add. I think there's a lot of little nuances here that I've heard here, that some good ideas that have come forward from the public side as well as from this table. I think the detailed design aspect of this are critical. I'm just going to I think reflect briefly on what I have, if I can find my notes, what I heard reading through all those hundreds of pages of commentary, and sort of where I sort of think, I mean, one was, I think, the all ages piece, finding amenities and activities from everything from toddlers to teenagers to elderly is really critical, and I really appreciate the efforts to look at that in the design options. I think that it's incumbent upon us, and I've heard certainly from the talking to some of the impacts of these things, right? The looking at it from the the middle of the days of the week to the weekends, the evenings and the mornings, and these sort of making sure the park is active all day and all week, I think has been heard loud and clear, and I really do appreciate the sort of the mix of things that we're talking about here. I think achieves that activity and from daycare in the daytime and stuff. Steve, or Mr. Meikle, did you wish to add something?
Thank you, Your Worship. When you have a moment, if we could get a bit of clarification on Councillor Patterson's point of the cash flow analysis, just wondering if that's a look at sort of the operational side of the building, and just wanted some clarification there. Thank you.
Do you want me to get cut at it, or do you wish to?
Shall I
Go ahead.
answer that? Yes, thank you. In the budget, there was a revenue projection for option 2 already, about 1.85 million. That's over the life of this facility. So really, that is no cash flow to carry it. We're carrying it basically in our budget and in our taxes. Option 3 could change because of the daycare center opportunity in it. So what I'm looking for is kind of that kind of a projection that we had for option 2.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that would be very helpful as well. I think just understanding what is the revenue opportunity for renting of the room, of renting storage space, those kinds of things. The other things I heard, I think, the walking trail, activations on the trail, things of that nature. I think we did hear a fair bit of desire for some sort of off-leash enclosed dog run. I don't know if that's feasible anywhere on here, but if it is, it certainly wouldn't be in the area where it'd be probably on the opposite side of the park from the tennis courts, but that would be something to look at. Interestingly, I mean, what is very clear is that there's no way on this piece of property we can accommodate the demand for all the tennis and all the pickleball that people want to play. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So we're going to have to come up with some sort of compromise on that one. And yeah, I think the last one was just how in demand childcare was. We kept hearing that over and over again to see childcare return into that site if possible. So I'm glad we have those options in front of us. I'll leave it there for now. I think any of the little small things I heard, and I guess I also want to reflect a couple of other quick comments. One, there were some little things in both community comments as well as some things in the report from the consultants that sort of I thought really captured sort of the importance of making this a community welcoming space. Things just like having like hooks to put up to hang up your jacket when you're in the courts. Water fountains, readily available, and just seating places so that when you're waiting for something, you have space to sit. Just those little things I thought was really, so I think carrying that thought, how is this going to be used and is it welcoming for people is a really, really critical one. And I secondarily I know this has been a bit of a difficult process to manage because we started this sort of high level contemplation early. We're back to April 17th, I think was the first start of this where we've got public and council views of it. We're a long time later, and I just appreciate staff's, work to kind of try and incorporate what we've heard over the time into what came before today, and also just, I know you probably borne the brunt of some of the comments and then things that have come as this is impatiently waiting, including us, to come back to this table and have a chance to talk to it. So thank you, Steve, and or Mr. Meikle and Mr. Graham for that. I know this has been a bit of a tricky file. Back to you, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks so much. I just want to ask a question because I hear what Councillor Watson is saying about the change rooms, but I wonder if, Mr. Meikle, if you would have any comment on how the usage of the change rooms at Windsor Pavilion, because I think that those change rooms are used pretty readily, and I would believe that the change rooms at Carnarvon would be specifically more along the lines to be there for tournaments and things like that. So if you could just comment on that, please.
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding, and sorry I don't have a detailed analysis of that here, that yes, the Windsor Pavilion change rooms are well used by rugby in particular, and by all ages. Now, rugby has some different elements of that sport that often require more showering options after a game, etc. So it's one I think we would like to engage the user groups in some further discussion about their desire for change rooms at Carnarvon and see if that really is something they're interested in. Certainly the desire to look at that space has been noted, and we'll re-engage with those user groups.
Thank you. Anything else, anybody? Councillor Watson and Councillor Appleton?
Yes, just an additional thought, and it is with respect to sound attenuation and pickleball. I, from what I hear from folks, unless there are regulatory approaches to trying to address that issue, but there are also physical infrastructure changes to address it. So, I think I'd like to see some physical approaches to attenuating sound around the pickleball courts.
Thank you. And I have one other thing I'm just going to throw out there so people can contemplate it for a moment, in case there's any wish to move things forward. I don't typically make motions. I note looking at the designs that some of these squishiness, there's a couple of things that maybe from a design perspective, we might be able to put the pickleball courts closer just by some physical separation between them and things. But I guess the other question I have is, should we be looking at just extending them towards the street, right? Like actually having those courts go right up to the edge of the street as opposed to having those parking spaces there in front of those. There's certainly a lot more space available there for use some of that, what is currently hardscaping space already. So I'm just going to throw that out there. People, if that's something that people think we should look at, that might be worth to get from the parking piece. I have Councillor Appleton, and then back to you, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Worship. So further to your earlier comment, I would propose an amendment to the motion on the floor.
Sure.
That I would move that the technical analysis for option 3 be expanded to include the addition of a basement and/or third story.
Second.
As options specifically, not as a, yeah, thank you. That's moved and seconded. Do you wish to motivate?
Thank you, Worship. I think it's been spoken to fairly well here. I think evaluating all options available to us, I think is smart at this stage. As Mr. Graham has pointed out, if some of the infrastructure like elevators already exist, then we should probably explore these options. Storage, I've heard really clearly from many people, lots of feedback about the need for storage, which could potentially suit a basement and free up more ground floor space. So I think this would be a good option to explore.
Thank you. Any other discussion on that? Councillor Smart?
Yeah, I will just continue to voice that while I'm in favor of the basement, I'm not in favor of the third floor unless I guess it was to strategically have a smaller footprint or to have some other advantage to it. I don't quite see the draw for that yet.
Okay, I'm happy to call the question. This is on the amendment, so if this passes, then some pricing, at least costing options will be brought back as for both what the cost of a third story and what the cost of a basement would look like, so we can contemplate that. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. To respect the thing, anything else, Councillor Appleton? You have the floor. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mayor. And you reminded me, actually, I've been I've been in Squamish in the last little while, and they have pickleball courts there that are set up very differently than what I've ever seen before. They're much closer together. They have barriers between them, and so I will be in Squamish in a couple of weeks. So I might take a picture and send it to you just to have a look at a different configuration for courts.
Thank you. I learned that from the correspondence that we got from the public. So it's hard to read all that stuff, but boy, there's a lot of good information. So everybody, if you're still here, thank you so much for submitting your thoughts. It does help us with some of these options and ideas. I'm happy to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. So options 2 and 3 will come back. I do want to throw out there, does anybody wish to look at what that would look like to expand the tennis and pickleball courts into what is currently parking space?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, so I just get a motion to also include
I will make that motion to extend the pickleball and tennis courts into the parking
just
area.
for staff to bring back that as what that would look like as options. Moved and seconded. Thank you for that. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. I think that concludes our, oh, sorry, was there any other questions? I'm sorry, Mr. Graham, that you had that you wished some clarification on? We're good. Councillor Braithwaite, you may say one thing.
Thank you. As the council liaison to Parks, Rec and Culture, I just want to thank Mr. Meikle and Mr. Graham for all of your work on this and the consultants. It's been a long time coming. It's been from when I was on council before. We did the original Carnarvon master plan, and it's just so wonderful to see it finally coming to a point where we're going to be getting pricing on something, and that's going to be something that's going to make Carnarvon, the Carnarvon Park, really more like a gem in that area of our municipality. So I just want to thank you both very much for all the hard work that you've put into it. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Would this be the appropriate time to add another motion? Should I have one? Yeah. Through you, Mayor, when this project comes back with a timeline at its next stage, I'd like to put forward a motion that when the timeline is next brought back, that staff also bring back any potential quick wins or temporary fixes to make this park better for its residents during the next few years as this project is implemented. And then if I motivate on that as well. Well, we'll see if it seconds a second.
You can if you seconded. Sorry. Okay. Do you wish to ask? I'm just wondering if you get some input from staff as to what, if this is necessary or.
Yeah, I don't know if this is necessary or not, but I guess there were a lot of things that came up in the report, such as small fixes, even things like seating and lack of bike racks and things. And I don't know how long this project is going to take, but this community has gone so long without improvements to their park. And I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to provide adequate things for the park. And there might be some quick things that could happen if this project's going to take a few more years.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. We can certainly bring back some options. There are elements of the park plan, park options, such as the accessible trail around the park that certainly could be looked at. The major challenge will be, of course, if your demolition of the building itself will take that primary space, will have to be out of use. So we will be also looking at and bringing back some more detailed drawings of the splash park. The plan is to, as you see within the conceptual design, to replace the splash park. It does need to be done in conjunction with the building. All the water and mechanical functions of the splash park are currently located in the building, and the plan would be to keep that within the building. That's the safest way to do that. So that will all come back, but of course that it's a major construction project and will be difficult in that area to have any short wins that wouldn't have been taken out to do the building, but we will bring back some options to do that.
So that's the motion. Is the motion helpful then, just to kind of just make the ask? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm thinking things like bike racks and picnic tables and things that could be uninstalled and reinstalled later. But it feels to me, and it's not my park, but in experiencing that park, like so much has been put on hold for so long, that there could be some small little things to make it better until we make it amazing.
Thank you for that. And I do think that's in alignment with what we've done to this point, in the sense that we were dealing with the pickleball issues and so forth, and we decided to resurface the tennis courts, even though we knew it was a temporary use space for it, but we felt there was enough years and time that was going to have to be used, that we wanted to make sure they were functioning for that duration. So I think in that spirit, that's not an unreasonable ask to have. Sorry, I'm speaking and motivating on the motion going to other speakers. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
I'll just add my comment, and you expressed it, Councillor Swearing expressed it more eloquently than I did, but that was the point I was trying to make. Are there some low-hanging fruit that we can address now, given it's been a long time coming in terms of major park improvements, so thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion as it stands? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Am I seeking
Move adjournment.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. And we will see you back here in hopefully not too distant future as we start looking at some of the more detailed portions of this park. We always clap at the conclusion. We're all happy it's over.